Hello, people. Hello, subscribers. Not that subscribers aren't people, because we know they are. And welcome back to the Reach Your Dew Point podcast. And today I have a great guest, Tom Augenthaler, who has a very interesting job. He's got a Harvard education and a background in PR, for example, having been the worldwide PR manager for HP. Nothing big, just a PR manager for HP. Ivy Worldwide, and then made a very interesting switch, which is kind of his dew point. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But as you know, I usually start off by pulling something out of people's LinkedIn profiles and letting you know about that. And Tom says, I help B2B, business to business brands cut through the noise and win mind share through strategic influencer campaigns that connect where your buyers already hang out. So welcome, Tom. Nice to have you on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Roy. I'm really happy to be here.
It's now you and I know in the interest of full disclosure, you and I know each other for quite a while, and you in fact have positioned me with certain companies as an influencer. I've been practicing my duck lips, trying to get better influencer positioning. Not that kind of influencer, folks, as you can tell by looking at me. So tell me more about what an influencer is to you and in your work. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great way to lead off, I think, because the word influencer is a loaded word these days. And to your point about the duck lips, I think many people immediately go to the idea of TikTok or Instagram or something like that when they hear the word influencer. They think about beauty brands or travel or fashion brands, things like that. But in the B2B world, it's a different kind of influence. So the influencers are much different. And by that, I mean, it's more about expertise and authority in whatever niche they operate. And they usually have to have a proven track record to even operate there. So we're looking for thought leaders and experts and consultants and independent analysts and people of that sort who know what they're talking about, who produce content on a regular basis, and who have a real authority in a certain niche and talk about that and what it means for the business niche in which they operate. So that's what that really means. So a lot of these people are found in terms of a social media platform on LinkedIn. So that's from a social media perspective, that's the first place you would probably go to start looking for them. But they're not always there. Sometimes you have to, delve a little deeper to find out where they're really hanging out, where they're producing their content. And at times I've worked with influencers who had a very minuscule social media profile on LinkedIn at all, or anywhere else for that matter. But they were very active in industry associations and things like that. So whenever those events were taking place, that influencer would be there and they would be keynoting or holding panel discussions or even conducting courses on site during those conferences. So it's a whole different ball of wax. And that's largely because in B2B, as you know, we're talking about something completely different than in the consumer side of things. We're not talking about buying a pair of sneakers for $150 or something like that. We're talking about some kind of business solution, which is a business to business sale. So the sales cycle for something like that is typically much longer, 3, 6, 12 months, maybe even longer, depending upon what the solution is. So it's a whole different ball of wax. And many, many companies these days struggle with getting their message in front of their ideal buying audience. So one of the ways to do that I found through trial and testing is through influential voices. So that's what I focus on as a business, doing just that.
I remember seeing a cartoon a couple of years ago, and it was somebody standing in front of a whiteboard, and at the top it said marketing plan, and it was just boom, 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 boom. The whole whiteboard was just covered, and the person at the whiteboard was saying to someone standing behind them, "Our marketing isn't working. We have to do more of it." And but that's the noise. That's really the noise, right? And we're all subject to it, where everything has advertising embedded in it, and every place you look, there's some slant on marketing or sales. And so the idea that you have is, as I understand it, is that you get somebody who's familiar with the industry, knows the products and knows the protocols and knows the people a lot of times, is likely to have a good result if they're talking about a specific product or introducing people to a specific product. Do I have that about right?
Yeah, that's it exactly. So those people already exist; they're already out there, um, and so it's a matter of figuring out who those voices are, and then working to introduce yourself to them, your company, and messaging, product suite, all that kind of good stuff, and then seeing if you can co-create some content together to deliver that message to the buying audience. Um, Another thing is achieved, though, it's not just getting the content created and delivered, but the delivery is through the influencers network, not the company's network at first.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a different distribution channel or channels. Sometimes the influencers have multiple channels that they use to get their content out and distributed. So that's an added benefit to this. So the distribution goes far and beyond just what the company could normally do on its own. The second thing is that once that content is produced, that gives the company something to repurpose and use on their own in their own marketing. So they can take snippets of that podcast, for instance, or maybe some lines from the blog post or the article, and they can use that to sort of develop a LinkedIn post or a blog post or something else, and kind of lead off with that, and then push that message through their own channels. So it's a more interesting way of delivering their message. And I find that it resonates well with the buying audience because it's coming from individuals, not necessarily the company as a brand. We get bombarded by brands all day long, and 99% of them we're just tuning out as we go throughout the day. But when somebody that we know and respect and like and follow says something, we're more apt to pay attention. We're more apt to take a look. If could be anything. I mean, just think about it from a personal basis, right? I mean, Roy, you could on LinkedIn, you might recommend a book, a business book that you've read recently that really struck you and really made you think and maybe even evaluate things a little bit differently. And so you put that out on a post to your audience. And, if I'm looking at that, I might think, oh, wow, Roy thinks that's an interesting book. I think maybe I should take a look at that too, and start looking into it. So that's kind of a consumerish sort of example, but it works with other things too, especially if you're hearing it from your peers. So many of these influencers are, like I said, industry analysts, independent analysts, consultants, and these are people that usually have the ear of many of these B2B buyers.
So, as you may be aware, the pivot point of this podcast, the reason it's called Reach Your Dew Point. A dew point is something that I've defined as that moment when you make a move to go either ahead with something or in a different direction or something like that. Sometimes it's changing a career. Sometimes it's just launching something new. So that, from what I know of you, I think that dew point comes from the move from PR into influencer marketing. Does that sound right? That's your pivot point there?
Yes, in terms of this iteration of my career, yes. In a prior career, I was on Wall Street and I worked as a stockbroker. And I was just sitting at my desk one day, and I had sort of it was like an epiphany, or just it came to me. I was not motivated by money purely the way the other people around me were. That's a problem if you're a stockbroker.
If you're a stockbroker, yeah, I could see that.
so I started reevaluating and making moves, and then I got out of the business and I went off in a different direction. But in terms of from PR to marketing or PR to influencer marketing, it happened when I was at HP, and it was around the 2007, 2008 time period. So we were doing a lot of the traditional PR scenarios that any team would do at that point in time. We had our business press we went after, we had trade press we went after, we had reviewers that we went after, and it was all pretty well established. Many of them had been around for a long time, but there was sort of an industry consolidation going on around then. So publications started merging and going out of business or becoming an online publication instead of a print publication. And in those days, that was a little questionable. Were they really going to be able to make it or not? Right? Because everybody was like, well, print is still king. At least in those days, that was still the thinking. So those things were happening. And then on top of it, I'm watching this movement percolate with bloggers. And I kept watching this, and I was kept noticing, boy, these bloggers are getting more and more prominent. And not just, bloggers for the sake of blogging, but industry technology bloggers started popping onto my radar screen. And I would follow some of that. I really didn't know who they were, but I was following some of their content. And then in 2008, when we had that whole financial crisis where it really imploded much of the traditional media industry. So many publications then went out of business. Reporters went off to do other things. So I'm really left with a conundrum. Well, how are we going to get the word out about the products? Because we still, as a business, have to get the word out about the products. And if a new laptop is coming out, well, how are we going to get the word out about this laptop? Who are we going to talk to? Because the publications that we worked with, the list went from this to this. So what are we going to do? So that's when I started experimenting with the bloggers. They were just tech bloggers at those days. We didn't call them influencers. That word really wasn't used very much. And I started with a small number of them just to keep it manageable. And I was working with some guys over on the AMD team because they were helping, because they had been working with some of these bloggers too. So I kind of coordinated with them, and together we figured out a pilot program and put it together. And it was a little off-putting at first, because when you're putting together packaging up a $2,000 laptop or something, and you're going to send it off to somebody. When I send it off to CNET or some other well-known tech reviewer, I wasn't worried about it not coming back or anything like that. We're dealing with a reputable institution, right? Well, suddenly I'm packaging up laptops and I'm sending them out to Richard so-and-so over in his home address. And in one case, there was a kid. We actually worked with a 17-year-old who was not of legal age, so his mother had to sign the agreements for us to be able to ship the laptop to him. But the end result ended up being really great, because the content that these people created was perfect for the audience in which the laptop was made for. So we did the normal things. I would brief them on the laptop before they received it, so that they understood This is not a gaming laptop. This is not a business laptop. This is one that's made for a consumer audience that does this, that, and the other thing. So they understood all that, and they enjoyed the process, I think. But the content they produced was dynamite. It was longer, more in depth, well thought out. It spoke directly towards the buyer in a way that some of the other more traditional reviewers didn't quite do. So I took that pilot program and then just doubled down on it for the next one, and it just snowballed from there. But that was really my awakening, if you want to call it that, where I started to understand that the media landscape was shifting dramatically. And PR teams, marketing teams needed to be aware of this. Now, one of the early influencers I began to work with was a fellow by the name of Tim Ferriss of the 4-Hour Work Week fame.
Mm-hmm.
He went on to do a whole bunch of other things and today has a huge podcast. I'm still in touch with Tim once in a while. But I thought that, wow, we should start working with people like Tim Ferriss now before he becomes a sensation so that we can build a relationship and, you know, maybe even get him to talk about some of our products, if not now, down the road. So I got permission to start doing some of that work, but they didn't want to sponsor him or anything at that point. But the funny thing is it's like maybe 10 years later or so. No, not quite that. Maybe it was 7 or 8 years later. I got approached by some people on a team within HP, and they were like, "Hey, how can we get in front of Tim Ferriss? We'd really like to work with him." And I said, "Well, that boat has sailed a long time ago, and there's no hope of that happening now." So at least there was a little, reassurance that I was on the right track at the right time with that. But from there, I went to a small consulting agency after HP, Ivy Worldwide, and they focused on influencer marketing before most other firms ever thought of it. And the funny thing is that when I landed there, Roy, I expected I was going to be doing, mobile phones or things like that, whatever the client happened to be. And instead, the HP Enterprise division came knocking at the door, so to speak, and approached Ivy and said, "Hey, we know that some of your people have done some work for the HP Personal Systems Group," which was where I was at, the division I was at, and they asked if we could put together a pilot program for them in the Enterprise division. So the guys at Ivy said, "You need to be put on this because you know HP better than anybody." So I started, with some help from the rest of the team there, putting a pilot program in place. And that program is still running to this day. And it looks a lot different than it did when I was there. But some of the influencers that we brought into that program are still working with HP to this day. So that shows you the value of relationships over time, especially in the marketing realm. And it was a really rewarding experience because I got to trial a lot of ideas with HP. They were pretty open to new ideas. So over about a span of about a year, we put together a fully functioning, fully executable program that was an always-on program and involved constantly finding and bringing into the fold new influencers for their various business groups within the enterprise division. And we made a lot of headway. We did a lot of great work. Funny enough, some of that content is still findable, searchable today.
Evergreen content rocks. I've been saying that for a long time. things that are not immediately pegged to a particular product that's getting released on Tuesday and will be around for 6 months, but something about the way that product gets used that will mature over time, something like that. So, yeah, I can see that definitely. That's an interesting story. And so now, in terms of certainly in terms of consumers, although I suspect, just my guess, that the consumer side of influence is wearing a little thin. Uh, but in terms of how things are working now, do you see changes within the B2B influencer market, and what do you think is going on, and how are industries dealing with that?
Yeah, I think there's a few things happening in the B2B realm right now. The first is that the idea of working with influencers is now gaining traction faster than it has in a long time. The B2B world operates on a slower pace than the consumer world. The consumer world is
Sure.
very quick. So they're really starting to look around, ask the right questions, and they're beginning to want to dial it in, and they're wanting to start piloting this. The companies that have been doing it for a while, I'm finding, are now looking to do more programmatic campaigns with influencers. And by that, I mean they want to set up campaigns that they know are going to last 2-3 quarters, maybe even a year. And they want to start to get that content ready and have it ready to go sooner rather than later. So in the past, a lot of it has been sort of experimentation. Let's put our toe in the water, our finger in the water. Let's get the temperature. Let's work with a few influencers. Let's see how it goes. Maybe we'll do a little more and a little more. So, but there's never really an always on aspect to it. The programmatic aspect is more always on and strategic. So during Q1, we want to do this. Q2, we want to do that. Q3, we want to do that. Q4, we want to do something even a little bit different as we wrap up the calendar year. And they're starting to look at the ways influencers can fill certain holes in which they're trying to reach those buying audiences. So I've got, in my Rolodex, so to speak, I've got influencers that do podcasts, that write, that publish LinkedIn articles, do blog posts, will publish articles on other third-party sites, even some media sites. We've got, guys who do radio. YouTube, of course, is a growing platform for a lot of B2B influencers. So they're starting to get out of the audio-only mode, and they're starting to shift to a lot more video. You're seeing the video, I think, a lot on LinkedIn, which is all a good thing, I believe. So there's a lot of change going on, and then of course the whole AI component. A lot of businesses are still struggling with, well, how are we going to incorporate the AI into our processes, our workflows? And then you've got the influencers, and they're working with AI as well. And that varies depending upon the influencer as to how they're using it and what they're using it for. So lots of change going on. I see it as pretty positive and exciting.
Cool. Well, that's always great. Positive and exciting is a good thing. We like positive and exciting. And so, do you foresee anything in particular that might be a next step? I mean, podcasts for sure have just exploded over the past couple of years. Just the amount of influence that people have had with their podcasts in every realm we can think about, whether it's entertainment, or whether it's politics, or whether it's industry. Just the consumer review podcasts, for example, where you have people who are known for reviewing the latest whatever mobile phones or computers or whatever, as you were talking about earlier. Do you foresee a time when there's something else coming down the road that you're starting to see off in the distance yet, or is it too soon?
I think you're going to see some. I've already been privy to some behind the scenes work on this, but you're going to start to see virtual influencers. And what I mean by that is there's going to be, you, Roy Atkinson. Roy, you could create a virtual influencer for yourself who you could assign to put out content on some of your channels. And I'm starting to see this already. I'm seeing it in ads. I've actually seen virtual influencers in some television ads on cable. I'm convinced they're AI influencers. They're not actual people. But you're going to see companies, I think, start to create some of their own virtual influencers that are spokespeople for the brand, but they're not real. You're going to start to see that. Some of that's been happening on the consumer side for quite a while now. Some agencies have created virtual influencers, and then they'll hire them out. And believe it or not, they have large audiences. So that proves to me that people are willing to follow these virtual influencers and, I guess listen to what they say to a degree, which is a little bit bizarre. It's almost something out of, some science fiction movie like Blade Runner or something. So we're starting to enter this weird time where reality and artificial reality are going to be blending. And I think the B2B world will be slower to adopt this, but I've already, like I said, seen some experiments. And it'll be interesting to watch. In some ways, it might be a positive thing. I don't know. Imagine, Roy, if you had a virtual influencer, a virtual version of yourself that you could assign certain pieces of content to, and it went out, you just went out and it published whatever. There would be channels that are populated by that, and you could reserve your work for the channels that you really found the most rewarding, the most beneficial for your business. So that kind of stuff is really going to
world we live in.
Shake people's world a bit.
It's an amazing time to be involved in, certainly in technology. And as you know, I'm up to my eyeballs in that, and trying to help, currently working a little bit with a university, working on their education program for strategic AI. So it is a fascinating time to be around in these various industries and see the changes that this technology is bringing. It's just absolutely fascinating. So thank you so much for coming to join me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Tom. And I look forward to seeing where we go after this. And maybe I am virtual. Am I virtual today? I'm not sure. I have to stick a pin in my eye and find out if I'm virtual or not or something.
Oh, well, let's not go that far. I think it would hurt. But
probably.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Tom.